Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming and thank you for listening. This is the panel discussion number 2 on technology and audience development. For the topic, we're going to be discussing expanding the Afroverse, technology's role in finding audiences and delivering crossover appeal for genre films. I want to thank the previous moderator and the discussion panel who were able to sort of give a history of Afrofuturism. I can say that myself, my first sort of interest in it came from a 2009 short film by a Kenyan director and creator. It's called Pumzi. I believe it stands for breathe in English, if I'm not mistaken. But for me, that was my sort of intro into what it is to be focused on telling these stories of African people and the African diaspora using science fiction and sort of alternative histories to tell the stories which are far more difficult to do in the traditional means and through traditional mediums. But I have with me Yusuf Abdul Qadir, who is a creator, technology and executive producer from the States, as well as Karl Hillbrick, who is the founder of Infilmpact out of Germany. It is an EU production company that works to put women and people of color in front of and behind the camera to tell stories of the African diaspora. So I will kick it over to Karl first to sort of regard his takes on the current platforms of streaming and social engagement tools for the African diaspora.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think it's really a fantastic opportunity to join this panel and quite critical. We really are at a point in time and place, and we have opportunities, and the African filmmakers and African diaspora have opportunities that now are possible. When we look at what's happening with regard to streamers, platforms, and the communities that are developing around them, there is a very exciting opportunity to be able to look at the data that sits behind all that and to be able to reach, find, and start communicating with audiences that would typically not have been found. So very exciting opportunities existing, crossover appeal, genre storytelling, and so on. And we'll get into that, no doubt, in a few moments. But when we look at this, there are the usual sort of websites and so on where we can access data specifically about what specific titles, genre types are actually moving. But we can go another step further and take those social media tools and then aggregate potentially with AI tools and so on to actually start finding some real interesting data sets, particularly with regard to some of these authentic stories and where they could resonate in other communities. I think up until now, one of the challenges we've had is finding these people. Before, it was all about advertising and essentially trying to create some sort of inbound marketing campaign to appreciate it. The reality is now, just by social media behaviour and these analytics and data sets are available to us, we can now actually take these authentic stories that are deeply rooted in African cultural languages and custom and so on, and be able to find those audiences. Not simply by just producing the content, but actually being proactive and being able to find these other audiences where they are.
Absolutely. I mean, we spoke previously about how it's important to be actively searching for them rather than passively letting the AI sort of do its tools, but rather discovering not only new technologies for how to find them, but also being front-facing in terms of objectives to actually reach them. Now, I know that, Yusuf, you said you worked in radio at some point. Do you feel as though there's any crossover in terms of... Do you feel there's any crossover in terms of how to reach folks through what was considered initially traditional and now sort of perhaps a less consumed medium in terms of Afrofuturism?
I mean, I'll first begin by saying, in my core of cores, I'm an Afrofuturist. In fact, previous introduction of myself is I'm an Afrofuturist, right? And so my show, which was an NPR affiliate podcast and as well as was on radio, was called Afrofutures. And so I feel like I'm home. I'm in the right location with the right sets of folks. And to your point, Karl, prior to my current film work, my day job was at Meta, where I worked on AI and creators. And so you are absolutely right about the opportunities that exist to both build an audience, to look at the data and to target and micro-target audiences, to leverage AI and to be able to be more effective in placing it And I don't think that's too different than the kind of previous kind of radio world. I mean, it's certainly different in the dynamics that, you have massive amounts of data at the most granular levels. And so that's different. The ability to kind of be very specific and micro-target is unique in this context. That's not like how radio was, right? And the kind of analog experiences of delay with respect to getting data and information from the direct source. What makes this moment, this kind of generative AI, this AI experience that we're in now, slightly different than kind of radio, is that it's not just that you can find your audience can find you.
Absolutely.
And I think that bi-directional relationship is a game changer. You can now be able to identify the entire stories that people want to listen to, want to read, want to watch, want to be pulled into by looking at the aggregation of the data of where their likes and where their engagement is directed towards, to be able to generate new stories and narratives from that.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm not sure if it was yourself or another individual who was speaking about the role of executive producing being not only finding the content, but now finding the modes to be able to actually disperse it, to get it out there. And I think you touched on that very, very, very well. But my concern is not only in terms of the technology, the ups when it works well, but where it may have fallen short. I know that you were speaking about the techs, the up and down nature of the technologies that have worked and the sort of case studies of some that haven't. So if you would like to, Karl, to speak on some of those.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're on? Yep. Okay. Sorry, we're just a little bit lower than what I was expecting in terms of volume. But when you look at, the ups and downs, specifically, we have a situation where low, and we'll just go over here. One of the situations, I think, is in the past we've had film producers, film executive producers, the whole team essentially looking for those viral moments and being able to cultivate those viral moments so that they can get visibility to their project or to their title, whatever stage their project's at. The reality is that as commercialization has become far more aggressive, particularly in social media, we're now not able to appreciate those moments. And the truth is, I don't think African and diaspora filmmakers should be looking for or trying to build around a viral moment. I think it's about building a house brick by brick, and that's done by being easily found by your target audiences and then reaching your target audiences in a more organic manner. That creates a more sustained development of the community around your film, web series, game, whatever it is that you're producing, that is then more sustainable. So, I think it's a case of, particularly when we look at the shortcomings of being able to appreciate and find those audiences, let's talk about building the house brick by brick rather than looking for the viral moment.
Absolutely. So foundationally, effectively, absolutely. And as far as crossover appeal is associated specifically for African diaspora and sort of content of people of color in the European sense, I know that, again, the previous moderator spoke a bit about co-production, but does your company, do they work specifically with attracting more co-pro or just connecting through co-production incentives?
Yeah, really good question. So I really do put my feet in both camps, I suppose. But look, if it was you living in a perfect world, I'd prefer just co-production, because I think that's where two producers and two teams meet on equal footing, and that's more interesting to me. As we move forward and we see such growth in Africa and diaspora for films and titles, content and games coming forward, I think some of these natural challenges will disappear. But the progress is there. One thing I did want to touch on, just on the previous point, is particularly when you're leveraging various AI tools and so on out in the background, look for tools that are developed off the back of of licensed or copyright content. It's a bit of a moving feast right now, and while we're waiting for certain, judgments, cases and so on to occur, the safe place is to follow platforms and tools that will be based off the back of copyrighted content rather than the alternatives in the marketplace. Now, that comment may amount to nothing, but for the time being, it's not a bad way to go if you're not sure what to do. Thanks for letting me inject that one.
No, not worries. And I don't know, Yusuf, if you have anything to add in terms of using what was effectively I know you mentioned that you're from New York, so I can only speak in terms of the sort of the London diasporic population, but is there much of an appetite within the North American and within the sort of Northeast for this appeal for Afrofuturism? And I can just say briefly before I let you speak on that, that I was sort of caught off guard by so many people when they saw things like Black Panther, which was spoken of also previously, the nature of that being the sort of first foray into African futurism. Afrofuturism, I should say. But for me, it was the Blade films, which was always my favorite sort of entry to not only a lead black Marvel character, but also just the concepts of Afrofuturism.
Yeah, when I was doing my show, I had an episode about what is Afrofuturism. Mm-hmm. And, Harriet Tubman was an Afrofuturist, right? Harriet Tubman was contemplating the future of Black people outside of the existence that she currently resided within. To be able to imagine that you could be free when you were enslaved is Afrofuturism. Just like imagining yourself in an alternative world. And so Afrofuturism is so profound and so transformative that I think we limit it to being science fiction. I love sci-fi. I love everything about it, but it's so much more encompassing, right? It's so much more profound. It's so much more beautiful and rich. And even the way that we speak about African diaspora is limited as well. I'm African American. My people came to the United States by way of enslavement, forced migration. I am an African. I'm a part of the African diaspora.
Absolutely.
Unapologetically, unabashedly, proudly. My stepfather, his family's from Puerto Rico. They're Afro-Latinos. They're part of the African diaspora. My best friends are from Gambia and Senegal and Nigeria. They live in the UK. They live in Denmark. Some live on the continent. I have friends who are from Saudi Arabia. They're originally Fulani. They're African diasporic. And so if we begin to try to expand our understandings and include more communities of who the diaspora is, I think we'll be even more successful in being able to target people and tell really more rich stories. I just want to say something quickly on the platform issues. Platform policies change. Platform priorities change, algorithms shift. I know I worked on the policies that determined the algorithms. Those shift based on how companies' priorities are. Your bet should not be on any particular platform, any particular set of algorithmic strategies, because that can change.
Yeah.
Do what Issa Rae did. Build a community, build a following, generate beautiful, amazing content, get a show on HBO, right? And so, I mean, it doesn't always work just like that, but that's the goal. That's the goal.
Okay, super. Oh. Oh, super. Oh, yeah, cool. Yes, absolutely. I mean, there are so many unsung Afrofuturistic films that are, as I said, unsung. Thank you so much for this one from Ethiopia. Absolutely, and thank you again for your comment. I should say that my father is Puerto Rican, and then my mother comes from Cape Verde. So I am also the diasporic, outcome in many regards. So I absolutely want to say I appreciate that. But I should say, in terms of your current documentary, Our Colors Never Fade, I was hoping you could speak on that briefly as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, a very interesting topic. It's the role of members of the LGBTQIA plus community from Ukraine that rather than fleeing Ukraine became combat medics, snipers, so on. And the reality of this film, it's actually not about gender politics at all. It's actually about nationalism. It's about courage under fire. And so with that one, we've been, the focus is to put this in front of a mainline conservative audience. And so we've been putting that through the lens of the things that, of why these people made these choices, what will resonate between them and our target audience, which is a mainline conservative audience. So looking at it and finding the connection between the audience, and two, our protagonists or our storytellers is key. Is entirely key. And genre storytelling, using crossover is a very powerful tool. And again, another tool available to African filmmakers and diasporic filmmakers as well.
Absolutely. I mean, in terms of telling stories which are almost impossible to be heard through traditional narratives. So
Exactly.
That's absolutely wonderful. And I also wanted to sort of just wrap up on Afrofuturism to say that I find that there's too much of a pigeonholing to it being sci-fi. You mentioned that it's more than just that, and I totally agree. For me, I'm more interested in the sort of fantastical aspects, the realism of it. The futuristic aspects, but also the fantasy aspects of it. One reference that I liked was Sinners, the recent smash film by Ryan Coogler. And for me personally, that did a perfect blending of African culture as well as to tell the stories of African Americans and to embody the diasporic, what it's been, even in that one shot, that dance scene, for anyone who's seen it. And I also find that that's through visual medium. Black Panther was done by Ruth E. Carter, I believe. She won an Oscar for that, actually. And she was also the costumer for Sinners. So I'm wondering if either of you have any input on sort of the visual aspect on how to tell a story through a purely aesthetic means, and if you have a sort of case study that you can speak on.
I mean, I'm newer in this space. In the last year and a half is when I began executive producing, and now, given that I've left my kind of day job, I'm now writing, right? And so I don't have case studies of sets or stories that I've been a part of that have embodied that. But I do think Ruth has done amazing work, both in Black Panther and in Sinners. Two amazing movies, two different movies, but two movies that I guess have Michael Jordan and Ryan Coogler in some kind of capacity.
They tend to do that, yeah.
It's a combination.
For sure.
But the visuals are very, like, we as Afro-diasporic peoples are visual people. We are a spiritual people. We are a cultural people. Our images, the stories, the ability to kind of engage people with the breadth of what we bring is embodied in the dance, is embodied in the clothing, is embodied in our essence. And we just have a different swag. No offense. We just have a
culture,
whole
tradition. Bring it on, baby.
swag,
Bring it on.
So the way that but our essence is itself a blessing, and it's something that enables us to be able to be magnetic. And so I think that moment that you referenced in the film was as powerful as it was. I mean, I literally was brought to tears because we can feel every part of who we were. The pain through it, but also the aspiration of hope despite the pain. And that, again, is Afrofuturism.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's it.
Yeah. Look, to add to that, I mean, it's really important to really stick to those cultures and traditions and not to generalize. Stay away from looking and trying to make this a universal appeal, but have this deeply rooted. Like this is what the audience wants. This is an opportunity. In the past, we've seen too much in the way of generalization and diluting these narratives, so it has some sort of homogenous appeal. But the reality is, you're absolutely right. The rest of the world are very fascinated by these traditions, cultures, visually what is happening on screen. And the only way that's going to happen is if it's really done to its truth and it's authentic.
Yes.
And that is what we're starting to see emerge.
Absolutely. And I have to say, with that scene and with other films and that have been able to properly sort of highlight this and embody this, we are seeing more mainstream appeal for people not only telling those stories, but doing so in an authentic lens, as you mentioned. And I think that through work like your company, Infilmpact, and through other works that you guys are engaging in, whether it be co-pros or directly African in African-made film, that's how we are able to further tell the story and further push Afrofuturism through technology and otherwise through the Afroverse. Thank you guys for your time.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.